Welcome back to the Fantasy Funhouse. This one's going to be a quick one as we're going to have the IEM Cologne groups. The play-ins are not quite finished yet, so I can't really dive into how we performed. Can quickly touch on NIP losing to Mals, which was kind of where my draft started to fall apart. I believe they're going to bounce back with the team players that I still have in play, so I'm not too worried, and I'm still pretty confident I'm going to finish in that top 30, which is kind of where we aim for as a consistent landing point. But unfortunately, it's one of those events where if you didn't pick Torji, that one player, getting that 1% draft or the top percentage drafts is very difficult. But for the groups, there's a lot more going on here. We have two groups within the groups, Group A and Group V. And I think even though we don't know the play-in teams quite yet, we can still start the draft because I don't really want to pick into any of the play-in teams. I think the only player that really enticed me from those play-in teams is Buzz, who has overperformed for me at 190k. Looking at the groups, Group A clearly has a favourite, and that's going to be Heroic. They have a really great run here to the upper finals. The other team that's most exciting here is Cloud9 with that new Electronic and Perfecto edition. I think a lot of people are excited about that. But I think Gamer Legion, they've made too many changes. I don't see them making a deep run. ENCE have kept the team together, but had a bit of a fall off towards the tail end of the season. So we'll see what they can do. They look good at Dallas, so maybe there's something they can show. Down here in Group B, this one's a little bit more volatile. With Vitality, Na'Vi, G2, FaZe, it's really hard to call which team is going to end up in this upper final. I think FaZe maybe have one of the better runs, given that they beat G2 recently, they show good form at Blast, and despite not having a coach, are still able to dig deep when it matters most. I think Na'Vi and Vitality are both very interesting teams to draft. Na'Vi's pricing in particular still hasn't stabilized, so there's a lot you can do with Na'Vi. Whereas Vitality, very expensive unless you lean into Apex. Normally I present a single draft with one of a bit of more of a riskier draft alongside it. For this event, I'm just going to put forward 4 optional drafts. These are kind of going to be templates to work with, and given that we don't know what the matchups will look like, it's hard for me to look one in specifically just yet. We're going to start with the team that I think is going to be the best one to draft into, as I mentioned, and that's Heroic. For my first draft, I'm going to go back to my Tessa Shush combo that worked really well for me at Blast. This is a combo that always finds success and is the cheapest one you can get from Heroic. With that one in hand, we want another cheaper player just to allow us to get something a little bit more exciting. We're going to be picking Rein at sub 200. I think he's a great choice from FaZe. Not as big a liability as a player like Karrigan, but one that can have carry performances. Another player that's going to allow us to do a lot with this draft, it's going to be Alexi B. I think as an IGL at 190k, he's one of the best choices in that price point, and so I'm happy to have him in my draft. He can have those pop-off games sometimes and is more or less a consistent 1.0 player, which is what you want for someone at 190k. For our very final player though, we're going to be grabbing Perfecto. We're going to be leaning a bit more heavily into Group A just because I think the matchups will be more favorable. I think Perfecto is a safe pair of hands, and particularly in a team that's gone through some changes, I still feel like he's going to be a consistent player, and his form has been fantastic this year. This will be my first draft. It's not going 2-2-1, which is the risk factor, but it's because I wanted to more heavily lean into Group A, and I didn't want to get a player like Karrigan or someone like that in this particular safe draft. If we're going to go for something that raises the ceiling a little bit, we're going to fall back, and we're actually going to be going for Cadian as one of our Heroic players at 212 is still really well priced. Alongside him, I'm going to be picking up Shush, and then going from there, we want someone that is going to allow us to get a very nice player. We're going to pick Karrigan. He's the most drafted player at the moment, and I expect that won't change. He can have those good games like he did versus Liquid, but he is still a liability and a risk here. To allow us to do one thing though, and that's going to be s1mple. We're going to grab s1mple and Alexi as our final part of this draft. This is a very risky draft, but s1mple at 217 is an absolute bargain. And so I wanted to put forward a draft that utilized him because I feel like a lot of people are going to have their eyes on him at that price point. And I think Alexi's a good choice alongside him. So I kind of like this one, but it's a bit too heavy on Group B for me normally. So probably not something I'm going to pick for this event. If we want to do something similar, we can reset here. We're going to go back to Heroic again. This time we're going to be grabbing Yabi, who has come down in price, and at 210 I think is a really good value pick. We're going to go back to FaZe, and I think Twist is great at 207. He's been in carry form lately, and I really like what he's been showing us this season after a bit of a slowdown at the end of last. Alongside him, unfortunately, we do have to grab Carrigan again. The reasoning for this is, once again, we want to go back to Cloud9 and we want to grab Electronic this time. He's a little bit more expensive than Perfecto, but has that X factor that I feel like is going to lift this team to the next level. A team with Yabby, Twist, and Electronic just feels really strong. But again, the issue here is we do have Carrigan in the mix, so there is some level of risk. But this one leans a bit more heavily into Group A, so I feel like mitigates that a little bit. This is the team I'm most excited about, I think, that I've drafted so far. And it's the one I think I'm going to be leaning into. So I'm going to put forward the Acrobats. It's high flying. It's a little bit risky. You can always fall with a draft with Carrigan. But I feel like with the star power we've got of these riflers, there's something special going on. And so that's the one I'm most likely leaning towards unless the matchups change things. I do have one final draft to present to you though, and it's a variation. We're getting out of Heroic. We're going straight into that double Cloud9 draft with Electronic and Perfecto, who a lot of people are picking that combo, and I can see why. Really good choices, really well priced. We get a bit of more of a solid performance from FaZe here, going Twist and Rain. We mitigate that Carrigan fall-off potential by picking out Rain instead. And for our final player, we go Alexi. This is leading more into Group B, and so comes with a risk associated with it. Plus, we don't have Heroic, which is also risky. But again, I feel like the floor is a lot higher on this than the other team. And if Cloud9 do perform how a lot of people are hyping them up, this could be the team that does it all. So there's going to be my two drafts that I put forward for you. Again, because the play-ins might change everything, which team's going up against who, I could change this completely. So keep an eye on my Twitter where I'll post my final team before the groups start. But for now, let me know what you think. Let me know who you drafted, how you did in the play-ins, and I'll see you for the playoffs.